Well, of course, everybody is talking about the Donald Trump Ron DeSantis feud. President Trump, over the past few days, has taken not only a shot at Ron DeSantis, but even some conservative pundits. You have people like Ann Inheat Coulter, who is not a solution to the problem. She is just gas to the fire. She constantly acts like the spurned girlfriend. I cannot stand a fraud like Ann Coulter. Her and Ben Shapiro are probably the two most known so-called conservative, and notice I say so-called conservative pundits that they just get under my skin immediately. Ann Hinheat Coulter does what she does because it's a gig. It's a paycheck. She's done well with it. Her books, her columns that she receives a salary for. She used to be a guest on everybody's show, but most people have figured out what her shtick is. And she's not really, to her core, a conservative. She likes to go on the attack against the liberals. Again, I don't know that's because she has those deeply held conservative beliefs or it's just good shtick. She's good at it, and it's a paycheck. But her coming out and saying that America is rejoicing because it's the final demise of Donald Trump. Gee, Annie, I seem to recall you wrote a book entitled In Trump We Trust, and that it was only Donald Trump who was going to be able to save the republic, yada, yada, yada. During the 2016 election cycle, you were out there on the campaign trail for him. You were giving speeches. You were at all of his rallies. And then you just decided, he didn't build the wall fast enough. And again, I don't know if really you just decided that hanging out with Donald Trump was affecting your bottom line and your paycheck, and you weren't getting some of the gigs that you were getting, so you made a tactical move based on your personal finances, but it was the wrong move, and you have relegated yourself basically to irrelevance. But Donald Trump is also on the attack against some good people now. He's even came out and lashed out against Candace Owens, who pointed out the obvious that, Mr. President, your base, MAGA Trumpers, were not for the mandates on any level and certainly weren't for the mandate of Love Potion number 9. And I have to be very careful here what I say because it doesn't matter that everybody else, including Jimmy Dore and far left progressives on here, are even coming out against everything that the alphabet agencies have told us for 2.5 years regarding, if I say anything, I immediately get a check. They never tell me a timestamp of where I said it, what it was I said, what it was about what I said that was a problem. I never get that. And I tell you, I don't say half of what some other people are now saying very openly, by which I agree with. But if I even hint in that direction, I get a strike, so I can't say it. But Candace Owens was right. Mr. President, people didn't want to be part of the Fauci ouchie. And I'm sorry. And that's one of those things that you're going to have to, if you're going to move forward and you are going to run again for 2024, and you got my vote, I'm for you, but there's two things you got to let go. You got to let go trying to somehow claim you're the hero for the Fauci ouchie, because I'm going to tell you, we've got enough information out there that even the left and the secular media is now beginning to talk about some of the problems with Love Potion number 9. You run and you make that a part of your campaign that Joe Biden was taking a victory lap for something that you did. I promise you, the narrative, the official narrative, will flip on a dime, and all of a sudden, we're going to get all these stats and all this data of all these problems that we were not told about before, and they will lay the blame at your feet. So be careful what you wish for here, Mr. President. Please back off this. And Candace Owens was right. Understand that your people, this is that one issue they're not with you on. And as a leader, accept it, understand it, learn from it, grow from it, and you know what? If you just came out and said something like, look, in the beginning stages of this pandemic, I didn't know what to expect. I've got all these different scientists and people talking in my ear, and my first and foremost thought was the safety and protection of the American people. and I did what I did. And in hindsight, there are certain things that we just acted too quickly on. There were certain other things that I really should have held my ground on. Some of these other things that became vilified and, were absolutely just shredded by the media, by the political left, by even Dr. Fauci himself, that we are now finding out that I was absolutely right on. And I should have held the line on those things. And, Mr. President, if you would do that, that would show your growth as a leader. Another thing you're going to have to let go of, please, there's no point in bringing up 2020 anymore. There's just no point to it. Don't sound like a bitter old woman like Hillary Rodham Clinton. Don't do it, don't do it, don't do it. Now, to some of the conservative pundits that are jumping down President Trump's throat over what he said about Ron DeSantis, referring to him as Ron Sanctimonious, a line that he got from Roger Stone. I was on the radio in Orlando, Florida, when Ron DeSantis ran for the governorship the first time. I did a lot to promote Ron DeSantis. Donald Trump made Ron DeSantis. Ron DeSantis barely got across the finish line. Barely got across the finish line. Barely got across the finish line. He almost lost to literally a crackhead out of the Tallahassee legislature. But he did prevail. But Donald Trump had to drag him across the finish line. He wouldn't have that gig as the governor had it not been for Donald Trump. I am on record as saying repeatedly, I like Ron DeSantis. He has done a great job for Florida. But again, Florida, or I should say the people around Ron DeSantis, they brought him further right. He didn't bring the state further right. You do know that DeSantis was a member of JAG. He was an attorney within the Navy, and he's got some, what we would call deep state connections. He would be considered one of those status quo politicians. He ran as a conservative, and I do believe he is a conservative in the sense that a George W. Bush is a conservative. But I don't think he had these hardcore, what we would call the nationalist populist agenda, had it not been, number one, for Donald Trump, and number two, the people around him dragged him there. And he was going along with all of the madness of late 2020, just like everybody else. Churches were shut down in Florida. Beaches were shut down. It was when he finally pushed back after a well-known megachurch pastor in Florida refused to close his church. 5,000 people continued to gather weekly, and there were pictures on the evening news of state police going into his church in Tampa, Rodney Howard Brown, and hauling him out in handcuffs before thousands of worshipers. And Ron DeSantis' people turned to the governor and said, this is not a good look. This is not good. We do not want to lose the Christian base. And it was then that Ron DeSantis had his come to Jesus moment, pardon the pun. He pivoted, and he reopened the churches, he reopened the beaches, and over the next few weeks, he really went hardcore in reopening the state. I was running a PSA on the radio in the state of Florida because Ron DeSantis, like every other governor, he had shut down the schools, he had shut down the youth programs, he had shut down the sports programs. Everything was shut down, and I ran a PSA for a group that was very concerned that there were no longer any safety nets or external eyes on children. What was happening to children? Youth pastors weren't seeing their young people because there were no youth activities. Coaches weren't seeing young people because there were no activities. Teachers weren't seeing young people because there was no school. And kids are trapped at home many times, perhaps, with abusers, with neglectors, and there was no outside eyes on them. And we ran a hot and heavy PSA campaign in the states of Ohio and in the states of Florida. And I credit what we did as putting a lot of pressure on Governors DeSantis and DeWine. Yes, Governor DeWine in Ohio was, trying to, out Cuomo. DeSantis reopened. He became defiant in his reopening, and all of a sudden, with his come to Jesus moment, he soared in popularity. And he did take a stand against Disney. He took a stand against the woke culture. He took a stand against the critical race theory in his classrooms, which is still going on, by the way. And even though Ron DeSantis declared in his own state that no state worker, no civil servant would be penalized or lose their job if they didn't get the Fauci ouchie, and the media was all over that, and conservatives were cheering that on. There are a whole lot of people in Florida who lost their jobs and they haven't gotten them back yet. Mr. DeSantis, are you going to fix that? I want you to put yourself in Donald Trump's shoes for a minute, and I'm serious about this. Here was a guy who defied the odds in 2016. He went up against the political establishment. I mean, he went up against Jeb Bush, Ted Cruz, Marco Rubio. He went up against guys that had a lot of political experience. He had none. He was a real estate guy. And he vanquished them all. And I understand. He wasn't gentle about it. It was a street fight. I get it. It wasn't pleasant. But he did it. He won. And from the moment he got in office, it wasn't just the left on him. It wasn't just the media pouncing at every single word that came out of his mouth. His own party, the Republicans, at that time led by Paul Ryan on Capitol Hill, did not come on board with his agenda. And then the whole Trump-Russia collusion thing. And for about 2 years, there were a lot of Republicans on Capitol Hill that were wondering if Russia collusion might actually be a thing. Remember John McCain, Lindsey Graham's special male friend, voted thumbs down on Trump repealing and replacing Obamacare. Remember that? Remember John McCain declaring that Donald Trump was going to have us at war with North Korea? John McCain, who when he came back from Vietnam under a Nixon pardon, but he didn't do anything. He didn't betray the country. He didn't in any way cooperate with the enemy, though I have provided on this program in the past the audio and visual evidence that yes, he did. He did TV commercials and public service announcements for the enemy. No, he was a prisoner of war and beaten. Bullhawk. But we'll never know because we've never gotten to see any of the records of what happened over there, because once he got elected, he got himself into committee position to seal all Vietnam War records. Which is why throughout the 1980s and 90s, everywhere you looked, there were those black MIA flags everywhere. Because mothers and fathers, brothers and sisters, and wives and girlfriends and sweethearts were never, ever allowed to see what happened to their missing soldier, their MIA, because John McCain, to conceal what he had done, sealed the records. And these were the people who claimed to be Republicans working against their own president. It was John McCain who had in his hands the famous, infamous Steele dossier. That whole canard cooked up by Hillary Rodham Clinton and the political establishment, which are Democrats and Republicans. As I've said before, this isn't a left versus right. It's a right versus wrong. It's not about conservative versus liberal, Democrat versus Republican. It's about them versus us. We the people, and the them is the ruling class. And Donald Trump wasn't part of it, even on the Republican side. They hate him. The military-industrial complex hates him. And as a result, even in his first term in office, he got so much done, but he had to punch and push through opposition from his own people. And then 24/7, the media narrative was constantly, excuse me, Fletcher, get back here. My dog is wandering and I can't have him in a neighbor's yard. 24/7, the news media was on Donald Trump over everything that he said and did. And we not only went through Russian collusion investigations, and every night CNN and PMSNBC declaring, this is it, we got him now. And Joy Nada Babeheart having orgasms on television that we've got Flynn, we've got Trump, we've got him. Whoopi Goldberg, we have serious things that Joe Biden and serious problems that he has demonstrated with his cognitive mental ability, and Camilla thinks she's a Hottie Harris, and the media says nothing. And so if there is some voter angst out there against Donald Trump, it's because, again, there is this media machine that is anti him 24/7, members of his own party against him. And the rhinos, the Ann and Heat Coulters, the Ben Shapiros, the Bitch McConnells, the Paul Ryans, the Witness Protection Romneys. Yeah, DeSantis. Let's make DeSantis the guy. They're trying to set DeSantis up, and I promise you, if they help him get the nomination, they're not going to help him get elected. Bump-a-dum-bump. You heard it here first on the afternoon drive. You heard it here. They will set him up to get rid of Trump, and then they won't get behind him because, well, can't have that populism anymore. Unless he still has enough ties to his old deep state connections that they can pull him in a room and say, here's how the game's going to be played. You going to play or not? DeSantis has done wonderful things in Florida. I do not believe he has the cojones or the ability to pull it off on the national level within his own party. I would personally like to see Donald Trump right now hold back. Let's get Herschel Walker across the finish line. Let's not give Warlock and some of these other pivotal races that we are still waiting for the results on. Let's not get them to get people all fired up that this again is about Trump trying to pull off another coup here. That, here he is, he's out there, he's declared his candidacy, and he's now attacking, everybody on the right. Mr. President, please stop. I hear you, I feel you, I understand that you have been denied something that was rightfully, I get it. But right now is still yet not the time. When that calendar flips to 2023, go for it. Let's get Herschel Walker across the finish line. Let's enjoy the holidays. And then let's go for it, Mr. President. Don't become the distraction. The distraction. Don't become the target right now. When I was in Bible college back in the 1980s, the chancellor of our college and the pastor of our church said something I thought was brilliant. The left couldn't figure out how Ronald Reagan got into office. They really could. They were stunned. Because, see, at that time, the Christian right wasn't actually official. There was no moral majority. There was no, Jerry Falwell out there as like the spearhead. And then after Ronald Reagan got elected, all of a sudden the Christian right, they organized into various groups, and other conservative groups popped up and other patriot groups popped up. And I remember my pastor saying at that time that what he feared was, now the left has a target. Now they have something to go after, something to attack. And it works much better if rather than organizing, we all just stay not officially organized. Because that they don't know how to attack. And I fear if Donald Trump keeps making this about him, and I get it. If any of you have ever been accused of something you didn't do, if any of you have ever been denied something that was rightfully yours, and you have been champing at the bit to finally have your day in court and get justice, and I get it. He has been patiently waiting now for 2 years, and we're through the midterms in his mind. So, okay, we got to get on. No, we're not quite done with these midterms yet, Mr. President. Please, if you do any campaigning for Herschel Walker, let's not make it about you. Let's make it about get Herschel across the finish line. And for God's sakes, pick up the phone and make nice with Kemp in Georgia. Because if you want to be president again, he's a Republican governor. You got to work with him. I will officially say, Ron DeSantis, though he's done great for Florida, and if I lived in Florida, I would proudly pull that lever for him. And you Floridians, you're blessed to have him. But he won't be like that on Capitol Hill. That's a guarantee. That's my Friday rant.